Alright, welcome back to another Adventures in Gaming with Andrew. We are once again playing Medieval Dynasty, and we are in the middle of spring, and we're just going to continue to build out our village, and I will talk about whatever strikes my fancy. So, for those who don't remember, we have set up a small orchard here. And if you look, we can see this has hops and plums. And this one has one plum, and then the rest we haven't planted anything yet. We also have various crops that are growing. Farm shed far away. So I guess we built a little too far away from the farm shed. Oh well. So if you recall, this is our farm, and this is our field, which makes one wonder how this is too far away, but not really, not really my problem. And if you remember in the management tab, we currently have one person who is functioning as a lumberjack. So we have one person. They are working in the woodshed, and they are getting logs and sticks and firewood. So they're producing approximately 44 logs a day, 9.5 sticks a day, 6 firewood a day, times 4, so 24. Right, so let's work on our food production first. We need to eat something because, well, we're hungry. The next person we get after I build another house, so one thing with houses is you can only have one man and one woman per house. And if you put a man and a woman in the same house, they will eventually end up married. Seems a little strange, but is what it is. So the next thing I want to do is we're going to build a house. And then I'm going to assign the new person to the hunting lodge. And then I will add a few more people, and they will be assigned to the barn and the well to get water. And then we will have wood, water, and food coming in. And at that point, I think, in theory, things will start to be going better for us. And as part of our journey, you can see that we still have to build 3 more houses in order to have at least 15 buildings. So that is what we are going to do very soon. I just want to see what food we currently have, because I'll also probably, want to take some food with me. Rot we can use over here. So rot I store in the barn because you can use it to make fertilizer. Right, so first things first, let's find out where we're going to build our next house. So there's one house, there's another house, and what I think we're going to do is we're going to build this house here. And eventually we're going to have, like, this is going to be the common area, and we're going to have a path going into it. So, presumably, we would want to just trying to figure out exactly how I want the layout to be. Not that it probably matters all that much. You know what? Let's have one over here, right here. We're going to have one facing this way. So we're going to build a simple house. It's going to be too big. So how do we want this? Yeah, right there. So we need to get stone. And I don't know if we have... Oh, we do. All right. So as I build, one of the things that I think I'll talk about today, because one of my Twitter followers recommended it, is canning, which I know sounds a little strange, but hey, I am into gardening, I'm into cooking, I'm into canning, so I guess that's on brand for me, right? Someone asked about my canning process with carrying a little bit too much weight here. And so I guess I will wax eloquent, or maybe not so eloquent, about canning. It's one of the things I like to do. Well, Lisa and I both like to do with our garden. And really, all canning is preserving... Stick, okay. Is preserving food that you have either purchased or grown yourself. And there are really two types of canning. You know what? I meant to make this a stone wall. Because it's going to take longer to build, but it will be better insulated. Anyway, there is really two types of canning. There's boiling water canner, and there's pressure canning. Let's do that. And there's boiling water canning and pressure canning. And the boiling water canning is, well, exactly what it sounds like. It's water that boils, and you use that to preserve. And then pressure canning, you use, well, a pressure canner, which is virtually indistinguishable from a pressure cooker, except it well, is made for canning. You could, I suppose, in theory, use a pressure cooker, but 100% unequivocally do not recommend that because it is not designed for that, and so it would probably not be safe. And the one thing for canning that you want to be careful of is you want to follow the instructions of an approved recipe in all circumstances. This is not one of the situations where it would be okay to, you know, get some recipe off of a blog somewhere and, you know, just go, this is probably okay. For canning, you want to find only approved recipes from sources that are reputable, which would be either your local extension, county extension, or there's what's called the Ball Blue Book, and there's a few other reputable, authorized, approved sources of recipes, and that's basically it. Anything else, and you are just asking for trouble. And the last thing I want to do is have someone go, oh, I heard about canning from this guy, and end up getting botulism and dying because you didn't do it properly. That would make me sad. And so it's one of those things that just be careful of. Make sure you always do it correctly. But with that said, it's actually not as hard as some people think. A lot of people learned it from their grandparents, etc. I learned it the way I learned many things, from a book. And through, you know, talking to a few people who knew what they were doing. But to briefly explain why there's the difference, or why there are two types of canning, you have to understand that the big risk, as I said earlier, is botulism. So botulism is caused by anaerobic, i.e. without oxygen, bacteria. They generate botulinum toxin, which is an extraordinarily toxic substance. Interestingly enough, also the what your Botox injections are made out of, if you are the kind of person to get Botox. So, fun fact. But in any case, the toxin is not great, and it can't be cooked out. In other words, if you eat food that is tainted with the botulinum toxin, you can cook it, and that will do nothing. It will still make you sick, no matter what. So the only way to really avoid it is to, well, avoid eating food tainted with the toxin. Now, commercial foods that you eat are, I don't want to say never, but virtually never going to be tainted because of health regulations regarding the processing of food for commercial sale, and it would be extraordinarily difficult for any entity to follow those rules and have food tainted with botulism, which is why basically 100% of the botulism cases in the United States are caused by eating, you guessed it, home canned products. And in almost all of those cases, it's by people who did not follow an approved recipe and either were experimenting or the classic, oh, well, this is how we've always done it, and it's never hurt us before. Which, by the way, is not a great reason. If someone says, hey, this is the way we've always done it, it's never hurt us before, and that's their sole reason for doing something, I would second guess that. Because it's essentially, I mean, it is survivor bias. In other words, if you were to not wear your seatbelt and get into a car accident and survive, it would be extraordinarily foolish to then argue, well, you don't actually need to wear a seatbelt because I survived without one, therefore seatbelts don't save lives. That would be objectively untrue, despite your anecdotal experience. As I jokingly say, and other people have said it as well, the plural of anecdote is not data. So, in any case, botulism. It's bad, kiddies. You don't want it. So, one of the ways to kill the bacteria that can cause or that excrete the botulism toxin is either very high heat or an acidic environment. So certain foods, like say tomatoes, are high enough acid that they would kill or inhibit the growth of the bacteria that cause it. Other foods, like most vegetables and meats, are low acid foods. And what that means is they don't have a pH sufficient to ensure that you can kill the toxin. Or, I'm sorry, kill the bacteria that causes the toxin. So, what do you do? Well, if it's an acidic food, like tomatoes, you will notice, if you look at approved recipes, that they all have you add lemon juice. And that's based upon a variety of tests where they have, essentially taken a ton of tomatoes and the pHs of those tomatoes and have determined through the scientific method, not just guessing, that a certain amount of lemon juice, which, if my memory serves, is 1 teaspoon per pint, or maybe it's 1 tablespoon per pint. I can't remember. That's why I always look at the recipe, no matter how many times I do it. It's one of the few times that I never try to go from memory. In any case, whatever it is, you add a certain amount of lemon juice to the to your canned product, and that raises or lowers, if you're looking at it, alters the pH to be sufficiently acidic to we have raised our skills. Anyway, to make sure that the bacteria won't grow and the food is safe. And as such, you just need to boil it in order to make sure it is safe from all the other things, just the normal foodborne illnesses that, you know, are just out there. However, the low acid foods, no amount of lemon juice, well, no amount of lemon juice that wouldn't massively alter the flavor or texture of the food will work to make the pH acidic enough. So there you need to make sure you process at a high enough heat to kill it. And boiling is not hot enough. And so for those of you that paid attention in your physical science class, how do you get water hotter than the boiling point of water? Because normally, once it hits boiling, it doesn't get any hotter, it just turns into steam. And for those of you saying, pressure, you are correct. If you increase the pressure, it has the effect of increasing the boiling point, which means that the water and or the steam that is inside the pressure vessel gets hotter than the normal boiling point of water at, you know, normal atmospheric pressure. So, for foods that need to get hotter than boiling, you use a pressure canner. And for everything else, boiling water canning. So, that was the sort of intro to canning. So now, one of the things that I can the most, I mean, by far, is tomato sauce. I do two kinds of tomatoes. I will do whole tomatoes, almost always Roma style tomatoes. And I do tomato sauce. I also do stewed tomatoes, which curiously, because it has bell peppers in it, is actually a low acid food, so you need to pressure can it. But for the others, you can boiling water can. So, in any case, for tomatoes, I grow lots of tomatoes. Well, Lisa and I grow. We collectively grow lots of tomatoes in our garden. And we grow usually at least 4 or 5 different varieties. Almost all heirloom style tomatoes. Not heirloom style, sorry, heirloom tomatoes, which means you can save seeds and keep growing them, as opposed to hybrid, which you can't. And as a slight digression, despite the fact that I like to grow my own food and can and generally do heirloom tomatoes, I'm not the kind of person that says that you're somehow like horrid if you use hybrids. I have no problems with hybrid products. Sorry if that disappoints you. And for those who are listening going, what in the world does that mean? Essentially, some plant varieties. In fact, a lot of the plant varieties of that you eat in stores, but also that you buy seeds for in normal gardening centers are hybrids, which means they're crosses of different things. But one of the effects, or yeah, one of the effects of that is that their seeds don't necessarily produce the same thing. In other words, when you grow a hybrid plant and then save its seeds and grow that, you will not necessarily, and in fact many cases will not, get the same plant that you grew. So if you're growing hybrid, you have to buy the seeds every year. Some people find that to be really troublesome. They don't really like it. And, I'm not going to get into that particular debate right now, but just suffice to say that some people think you should be able to save your seeds. And for those, there are heirloom varieties. That's just a fancy way of saying stuff that wasn't created by humans. Although that's a gross oversimplification, because actually most of the foods that you eat over the hundreds or thousands of years of human agriculture have changed them from their sort of natural environment. So even heirloom varieties are frequently changed by humans. So, don't come screaming at me if you're like a crop scientist and are mad that I'm oversimplifying. I fully admit I am grossly oversimplifying. In any case, we grow a mixture of heirloom tomatoes and hybrids. Frequently, the sauce style tomatoes, the Roma style or San Marzano style tomatoes, are heirlooms, and the beefsteak style, or the sort of bigger sandwich style tomatoes, are a mix of hybrid and heirloom. Because again, there are some hybrid varieties that we really like and that we think produce really good results. Okay, so with that digression taken care of, honestly, one of the trickiest parts of canning, that if you're canning from plants that you've grown, is harvesting enough to make the canning worthwhile at the, before it sort of goes bad. In other words, if you only have one or two tomato plants, chances of you being able to get enough at any one harvest to actually can a full set of jars is low. That's why Lisa and I grow, depends on the year, but anywhere from 10 to 20 tomato plants, which for those of you that have gardened before, you're thinking, holy hell, that's a lot of plants. And yeah, it is. If they all survive and we don't have any mishaps by the middle of the sort of tomato season where they're producing regularly, we are getting pounds of tomatoes every week. Which, however, is a good thing because it takes a lot of tomatoes to turn into sauce. A lot of tomatoes. So, it's actually shocking how many tomatoes it takes to turn into... crap. I meant to do more than one. How many tomatoes it takes. Obviously, stewed tomatoes and whole tomatoes take less because, well, you're not cooking them down. Makes sense. But in any case, the reason that we grow different varieties is I have found over the years of experimenting that making sauce with several varieties of tomatoes produces a superior sauce than using just a single, like, Roma or San Marzano style tomato. So if I am going to be in a canning mood, it's going to be a lengthy process, because first and so we'll sort of go from beginning to end, from harvest to sweet canned tomato sauce. First thing I obviously do, harvest the tomatoes. Ideally, a few different varieties plus at least one variety of, I say beefsteak, but that type of, big round, non-sauce tomato, that they tend to be slightly more liquid, less meaty, but have I think, a more compelling flavor than a sauce tomato. And it's ballpark. I mean, this is a gross estimate, and honestly, the exact mix truly doesn't matter. I'm just gonna do this and then drop some of them. Okay, let's drop 5 of them. And we'll come and get that later. Okay, so anyway, approximately, if I get 20 pounds of the Roma style tomatoes, I would only put in a couple pounds, at most 3 or 4, at most, of the other type of tomato, the sort of sandwich style, or the kind of tomato you buy at the grocery store. You know what I'm talking about. The thing that when you hear tomato, that's what you picture in your mind. So then I will cut out any bad spots. So if, like, it's a particularly bad season and we have blights, we harvest them hopefully before they get too blighted. But we'll cut out any of those spots. If for whatever reason you accidentally grab one that is too green, you can cut out the green part and you can still cook the rest, and it's actually fine. There we go. Our house is built. So, we'll prepare everything for cooking. And then here's where, and this is the only time I will differ from the approved recipe. And when I explain why, you'll understand why I do that. Great. Consequences of your decision. I like how this is a good example of life where you had exactly one choice. In other words, it wasn't really a decision, and yet, things happen. All right. So let's go into repair mode and see what we got. Okay, well, that was mighty inconvenient. Okay, so let's get 2 logs. Oops. Let's build this first. Let's get some sticks and straw and do that first. Repair. Okay. Anyway, I will. Normally, what the recipes tell you to do is to core the tomato, blanch the tomatoes, put them in ice water, and then peel the tomatoes, and then cook them. Because nobody wants to have tomato skin in their tomato sauce. And I speak from experience when I say if you skip that step, the product will not be as pleasant as you want it to be. So highly recommend not skipping that step. However, and this is, again, the only time I don't do that, follow the recipe, is I do not blanch and skin the tomatoes. I cut them into quarters, throw them into a giant pot, and simmer them until they are soft, and then I run them through a food mill. So a food mill is just a hand-cranked thing that essentially runs all of the food, whatever it is, in this case tomatoes, through. There's like a little plate with holes on it, kind of like a colander mixed with a cheese grater, except a little smaller, and the holes are a little bit rougher. And then there's like a hand crank with like a plate that forces the food through those holes. And essentially what it does is all of the tomato juice and all of the meat from the tomato goes through the holes. And almost all of the seeds and all of the skin is left behind. So after processing all of the tomatoes through the food mill, you end up with nothing but tomato meat and tomato juice, which is exactly what you want. And it is so much easier and I think faster than blanching and then peeling by hand the tomatoes, because you actually, because the coring to get rid of all the seeds, you also lose some of the tomato meat. So you actually lose some of your tomato by doing it that way. By running it through the food mill, almost 100% of what's left is just seeds and skin. You lose almost nothing. And then from then on out, you follow the recipe, as is, in terms of, the tomatoes and putting the tomato sauce, or I'm sorry, the lemon juice in, etc. And one thing to keep in mind when it comes to the recipes is don't add things, and this is what I mean by following the recipe. Do not add things like onion or garlic or anything else to the tomatoes. It's tomatoes, and that's it. And then the lemon juice that it tells you to add at the canning stage. And so I just want to emphasize that this is not a time to experiment. There are recipes for canned like tomato sauce or pasta sauces. You can find recipes for them. Actual approved recipes, not some random food blogger. Okay, logs. I cannot emphasize that enough. Um, anyway, I then will make the tomato sauce, and really that is just a function of cooking down the tomato juice and meat until it's sauce texture. The actual texture is in many ways up to you. The thicker it gets, the, for lack of a better term, tomatoey-er it gets, and in many ways that is entirely up to you in terms of taste. Don't cook it down until it's paste, because then you can't guarantee that the recipe will actually work. But as long as it's just tomatoes and it's just, and it's sauce texture, you're fine. So I cook it down. I will sometimes cook a little bit down to make tomato paste and then mix it in with the tomato sauce so that it is still very sauce texture, because a little bit of slightly thicker, what really amounts to thicker sauce mixed in just adds, I think, a good flavor without altering the recipe in any way. Um, in any case, once you've done that, once you've cooked it down until it's ready, at that point you should be preparing your jars. So I like, for tomato sauce, I like to use pint jars. Um, you can use quarts, but there are many times, like for example, if I'm in a hurry and want to, or if I want to make um, like a, like if I'm doing pull apart pizza, for example, and I want like a marinara dipping sauce, I will just use a pint of my jarred sauce. I won't need a quart because that would produce way too much. Um, but then if I am, making a pasta dish, I can just use 2 pints. And so I find that pints are more flexible for the way that I cook for my family. But, there's no wrong answer here. The recipe tells you how to do pints or quarts. But what you do is, there are 3 parts to a canning jar. There's the jar itself. There's... All right, sorry about that. Got interrupted with a family thing that I had to take care of. And as much as I love this gaming and the talking, my family's more important. So anyway, dealt with that, and now I'm back. So as I was saying, there are 3 parts to the canning jar. There's the jar itself. There's like the metal band that you kind of see, the twisty part. And then there's the quote unquote lid, which is it's actually the part that seals. So it's the flat metal part that goes across the top of the lid, and it's the actual it's really the part that seals the food in. So anyway, those are the three parts. When you are here, let's take a look real fast. By the way, sorry to get distracted, but you can see that these plants are ready for harvest here. Um, so we can go harvest some food while I talk about food. Uh, in any case, um, what you do is you want to make sure that the jars are completely clean and free of any type of blemish. If there's any chips or cracks in the glass, you unequivocally want to not use that jar because, well, it could shatter. And the last thing you want is bits of glass in your food. I've never eaten broken glass, but I don't think it would be very good. So what you do is you will buy, so the jars and the bands are reusable, the lids aren't, although there is actually um, a brand of canning jar that purports to be um, reusable. I have never used it, so I cannot speak to whether it's safe or reliable, and so I have literally no comment one way or the other about reusable canning jars or lids. All of the lids I use, I buy new each time. And as you're preparing for canning, what you will do is in a pot of water that is not boiling, you will have, but is hot, so just below, just below the boiling point, you will have the lids and the bands in there. This helps with the sealing process and in a way keeps it sterilized. You may say, but Andrew, it's not boiling. How can it possibly be sterilized? Well, most foodborne illnesses are killed. It's a function of time and temperature. It's why sous vide cooking works, because, 165 degrees kills. I mean, so keeping in mind first that you're boiling is hotter than 165, so the water will be hotter than that. But even leaving that aside, 165 is hot enough to kill most foodborne illnesses instantly. But say 10 minutes at 155 might be enough, and so on. And so, anyway, you put them in the hot water and let them sit there for, I opened this and didn't put anything in, for the, while your sauce is cooking. When it's ready, they'll be fine. In any case, you will then get your canner. I have it's made by Presto. It's a combination boiling water canner and pressure canner. In other words, if I put the little weighted gauge on top and put the little seal in, it functions as a It functions as a pressure canner. If I if I take that out, then it, well, won't get any hotter than boiling because steam escapes, so it can't build up any pressure, so it can't get hotter than boiling. And so in boiling water mode, you fill it mostly up with water and set it on the heat so it is near boiling by the time you are ready to fill your jars. And you want to then heat the jars up. Some people will put the jars in hot water. I actually like to put them in 180-degree oven. But, do whatever works for you. And so what you'll do is you will take the hot jars, put them down using a funnel and a ladle. You will ladle in the sauce. You will add the lemon juice that the recipe calls for. And then what you will do is you will excuse me, you will assemble the two-piece lid. So you put the lid on and then tighten the band just finger tight, and then you will put the jars in the boiling water canner so that they are completely covered by water. If for some reason you the water doesn't cover it, just add water until it is, because the jars should be completely covered by at least an inch or two of water. And then you will put the lid on the canner and you will turn the heat on. And once the water has hit boiling and steam is coming freely through the opening at the top of the canner, you start the time. Whatever the processing time is for the recipe you are using. And again, here is where you do not want to deviate even a little bit from the approved recipe because you want to make absolutely sure that it is cooking for the full processing time, whatever that may be. So after it is done cooking, you will turn the heat off, wait for it to cool down, and then you can take the jars out of the canner and put them on, some surface to cool. I would recommend not putting them on a cold surface because, hot glass on a cold surface, they could shatter, which would be a really unfortunate ending to your canning adventures. But in any case, putting it on the surface to cool, and as they cool, so one thing you may notice is that the sauce inside is still boiling, although that usually only happens in pressure canner situations, but oh, that was sad. It's sometimes happens even in the boiling canner. Um, but in any case, as it cools, you will hear a little metallic ting, like a clink, 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 and that will be um, the lid, which um, it's a little bit flexible. So in the middle, there's almost like a little raised button. And what you're hearing is a vacuum forming where it's sucking down that little thing and sealing the jar. And only at that point have is the food properly processed. Every now and then, for whatever reason, a jar will not seal properly. And when that happens, you either reprocess it or put it in the fridge and eat it, you know, as you would any other cooked food, assuming it's not been preserved. Because unless unless it seals properly, air could get in and the food could spoil. And, well, again, remember, foodborne illness, kids. We don't want it. You know how the old dare used to be say no to drugs? Maybe I'm dating myself. But the whole just say no campaign from when I was a kid. So what do we say to foodborne illnesses? Or what do we say to death? If you're a Game of Thrones fan, not today. So let us avoid foodborne illnesses. But at that point, once it is cooled completely and you are certain that the jar has sealed, you actually take off the little metal band, and all that's left is the lid itself, which is sealed on, so it won't come off on its own. And you have a preserved jar of tomato sauce. I most years, will end up with anywhere from 20 to 40 pints of tomato sauce on top of another 20 or 30 quarts of stewed tomatoes and whole tomatoes. And I will eat all of that within a year. But I have eaten tomato sauce that I canned 2, 3, 4, 5 years later, and it's still just as good as when I canned it. I'm sure there is an actual shelf life, but in sort of practical, normal use terms, I have not found what that is. And I, think it's fine for at least several years. I honestly haven't looked to see what the official shelf life is for that type of food. And I'm sure whatever the official recipes or air extensions say, that's what you should listen to. Again, just because I said that I've eaten it 3, 4, 5 years later doesn't mean it's safe. It may well be. I just honestly, off the top of my head, I'm not sure. So what do we want? Okay, put that here. Where this kitchen? That's what we want. We want. Oh wait, do we have enough to make cabbage meat? Yes. So this is what I wanted. Alright, so we're gonna do something fun here. Wooden bowl. Oh, I don't have enough money yet. Well, I lied. We're not going to do something fun quite yet. What do I need? What do I need? I need to make some stuff to sell. Oh, that's going to be way too much. Nope, not enough. Nope, not enough. There we go. Alright, oh, I know why, because I have tons of meat. So let's put the meat in here for now. It'll last a while in the food storage. I didn't have as much meat as I thought I did. Curious. Wonder what's taking up all my space here. I got 6 pounds of... Okay, I see. Got it. In any case, that is the canning process that I use for tomato sauce. There are, of course, other things that I can. I like to can... Oh, let's see. Green beans a lot. I do stewed tomatoes. So stewed tomatoes involves onion and bell pepper, and so that actually requires pressure canning. So there, instead of covering up the jars with water, you just have a few inches of water, and you set up the thing to be in pressure mode. I think it's 10 pounds of pressure, and you cook it for what seems like a long time, and you will then, you know, I need to sell this, I guess. And I know I've mentioned the extension a few times, but your county extension often, but maybe not always, in my case it is, but often associated with the agricultural state school. So in my case, it's almost always the county extension is almost always associated with Penn State, but that is not sort of universally true.
Hello.
Well,
Only
at least
the best products here.
At least I don't think it's universally true. All right, there we go. Cool.
See you soon.
By the way, that guy's voice actor is super creepy. See you soon. Sounds like a stalker who's going to make a suit out of your skin. Sorry for putting that image in some of your heads. In any case, the county extension is often a great source of information on canning, because they usually have like a home preservation whatever section, and if you have a pressure canner that uses a dial instead of a weighted gauge, it needs to be calibrated every year. and your county extension will frequently do that either for free or extremely low cost. So anyway, they are a great resource. Highly recommend reaching out to your county extension if you have questions, and I'm sure they'd be happy to talk to you. In any event, now we're going to do something interesting. After I get myself some bowls by getting some logs. Take some logs, turn them into bowls, which admittedly seems like a lot of work to turn a log into a bowl. Bingo bongo. Okay, now let's get the cabbage. Okay, so we've finally gotten to the point now where we can make this. Oh wait, I need to get the meat. We'll be overburdened briefly. That's okay. Because, well, it's right beside it. Alrighty. So now, we're gonna make some pottage. So, one thing that's useful here is, so not only does it give you food and water when you eat it, its price of 50, which usually means you can sell it for like 35, 40. It's actually a great way of making money because you've turned cabbage worth 3, meat worth a handful, a bowl worth a little bit, and made it worth a lot more. So that's how you can make early money on your hunting and farming of cabbages. Which is why the next, one of the next, oops, that's not what I wanted. Put that there so it doesn't spoil. Put that there so it doesn't spoil. I want to eat some of this. Alright. And now we have finished the day. I've shown you how to build a house. We have made some pottage. We've sold some stuff. And we've learned about canning. So all in all, I think it was a productive day. And so I think with that, I'm going to end this current video. Thank you all for watching. Hopefully you're feeling a little bit better than when you started. And if you have any topics that you would like to hear me ramble about, don't hesitate to reach out. And assuming I know anything about those topics, I am happy to ramble. So with that, bid you all a good night.